An interesting exercise here. This was actually a whole lot of fun to do. I had a comment on one of my videos here as we've been previewing. I want to get the name right. It was Aquabat 104 commented on our non-main event fighters preview. Very good idea. I have not watched, very good video. I have not watched MMA in years. Can you tell me some good recent fights I should watch? And so I went back. I used the cutoff of UFC 250 because that was just a little bit pre-pandemic. But that feels like kind of a modern era ish area for just leading into this specific fight. And it's also not far like, oh, well, did you see the fight in 2010? Like he said recently, right? So, or they said recently. So I thought UFC 250 to now, it's a 4-year span. That's a pretty good window for recently. So we've come up with 15 fight/rivalries that have kind of defined the last 4 years and a bit of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Starting first, it is UFC 254, Khabib against Justin Gaethje. This was Khabib's last fight. It was him kind of just showing that dominance that he had as the lightweight champion. He rides off into the sunset, and so I think this is good to kind of show, how close Gaethje got leading into UFC 300 now, defending his BMF title, but also to show just kind of the final send-off to that era in the lightweight division. After that, this one I thought was going to be honorable mention, but it stays on the list. It's Max Holloway against Calvin Kattar from the UFC on ABC, January 16th, I believe 2021. Either way, this is a time this is a fight that shows just absolute mastery by Max Holloway and what he was able to do. This is one of the more profound beatdowns that you will see, and it's just it is a clinical mixed martial arts performance and is so beautiful in its disaster that I think you absolutely have to watch this one. Up next, it is the second fight in the trilogy between Poirier and McGregor. This was just so like, oh my goodness, out of nowhere. And I think it starts what is kind of the defining part of Conor's legacy in this UFC 250 to 300 era, I suppose. And that is showing that Conor McGregor kind of isn't a part of these things. So that is, I think, kind of important. Like when you go through, and sorry, I got my dates wrong. UFC 250 was at the UFC Apex in June of 2020. So my apologies for getting that wrong. But so these are like kind of early pandemic to now. But yeah, McGregor has not really been a part of the UFC story for the last 4 years. And this fight is kind of a big reason why, and starts a bit of a spiral in the career, fighting-wise, of Conor McGregor. Obviously, he's in a movie right now. He's probably doing fine. UFC 260, Francis Ngannou against Stipe Miocic. The definitive heavyweight of this last little bit has been Francis Ngannou. And the definitive fight for him was against Stipe Miocic. If you want to go back further, Miocic against Cormier, UFC 241, an incredible comeback. He comes back to win the heavyweight championship there. But Ngannou and Miocic is just such an intriguing fight, showing the growth of Ngannou, who, all due respect to John Jones, who maybe doesn't deserve a whole lot of respect given some of the allegations that we heard about him, but Ngannou is the definitive heavyweight of this era for the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and for mixed martial arts just in general, because he's not in the UFC anymore, but I do think that defines part of it. UFC 274, Michael Chandler against Tony Ferguson. This was really the end of the Tony Ferguson era, so we're talking about ushering in a new era in the lightweight division. Michael Chandler, who is front and center in a lot of stuff right now, he gets an epic knockout, so I think that's an important one to go back and watch. And then I've cheated with these two to get to 15. Edwards Usman at UFC 278 and UFC 286. This was like the end of UFC 278 is so bananas in how Edwards was able to pull that off and then really establish himself as the new king in the welterweight division at UFC 286. I think that was very important. Speaking of establishing yourself, we are currently in the Islam Makhachev era in the lightweight division, and UFC 280 started that in his fight against Charles Oliveira, so that would be one to go back and see, like, This is the dude. Maybe even in the sport right now, this is the guy. UFC 281 and 87, the second and third fights in the Pereira Adesanya legacy, or a trilogy, sorry. I think it kind of shows where Pereira has been, and it also shows how it also includes Israel Adesanya and a win for Izzy, who I think has been so important in this stretch of mixed martial arts and the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Moreno against Figueiredo, UFC 283. It's the only rivalry to go 4 fights, so you have to see the 4th one and see how that one concludes. Then we got Makhachev against Volkanovski. These are the 2 pound-for-pound kings in the UFC and in all of mixed martial arts, and they fought twice in the span of a year, UFC 284 and UFC 294, so I think that's important. Going back to our female pound-for-pound list, Alexa Grasso against Valentina Shevchenko, UFC 285, to just see the enormity of that particular bout. UFC 292, Sean O'Malley against Aljamain Sterling. We have entered the O'Malley era. And so those are kind of the fights that I was looking to pinpoint, is like, what eras are ending, what eras are beginning, what kind of, like, we're talking like different chapters in the history of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. I think we are in the Sean O'Malley chapter right now. UFC 292 proved that. UFC 295, another Pereira fight as he fights Yuri Prochazka for the light heavyweight championship. The meteoric rise of Pereira, who is now main eventing UFC 300. It is incredible to watch, and it's been such a delight to follow his career in this little bit. Dricus du Plessis against Sean Strickland, just because I feel like du Plessis against Israel Adesanya is going to be the next great rivalry at middleweight. To see how it kind of all starts with du Plessis, I think is important. And then the last one, just a couple ago, Topuria beats Volkanovski at UFC 298. Ilya Topuria feels like the next one at 145 pounds, and so you get to see how he transforms into that in a tremendous performance at UFC 298. So those are the 15 fights that I think define this era of the Ultimate Fighting Championship.